If your church has a youth pastor and you are treating them like a minister for tax purposes, you could be making a very expensive mistake. Most churches assume that anyone with the word pastor in their title automatically qualifies for minister tax benefits. That is not true, and the IRS is not going to feel sorry for you when they come knocking. Stay with me, because what I am about to share could save your church thousands of dollars in back taxes and penalties. Welcome back to Church Money Made Simple, where we break down complex church finance topics into simple language that every ministry leader can understand. Today we are tackling one of the most misunderstood topics in all of church tax law: minister status for tax purposes. Specifically, does your youth pastor qualify? We are going to cover what minister status actually means for taxes, the specific IRS criteria that must be met, why youth pastors often do not qualify, what happens if you get this wrong, how to correctly classify your youth pastor today. Let's get into it. First, let us make sure we understand what we are actually talking about. When the IRS refers to a minister for tax purposes, they are not just talking about anyone who works at a church. Minister status for tax purposes comes with very specific tax benefits, including the housing allowance exclusion, the ability to exclude a portion of income from federal income tax, self-employment tax treatment. Ministers are treated as self-employed for Social Security and Medicare purposes, even when working for a church. Optional Social Security exemption: qualifying ministers can opt out of the Social Security system entirely under certain circumstances. These are significant financial benefits, and because they are so valuable, the IRS has very strict criteria for who actually qualifies. Just having a ministry role or a ministry title is not enough. The IRS uses 5 specific functions to determine if someone qualifies as a minister for tax purposes. To qualify, a person must be ordained, licensed, or commissioned, and they must perform ministerial duties as a substantial part of their work. Here are the 5 functions the IRS looks at. Function 1. Performing sacerdotal functions. This means performing religious rites and ceremonies, things like baptisms, communion, and last rites. Function 2. Conducting religious worship. This means leading the congregation in worship services, preaching sermons, leading the church in prayer, officiating religious gatherings. Function 3. Administration of a church. This means serving in a leadership role over the spiritual direction and governance of a church or religious organization. Function 4. Performance of teaching. This means teaching scripture and religious doctrine as a primary function of their role, not just occasionally. Function 5. Overall religious leadership. This means being recognized by their religious body as having spiritual authority and leadership. Now here is the critical point. The IRS does not require all 5, but a person must perform a significant number of these functions as a substantial part of their duties. A title alone means nothing. The actual duties are what matter. Now let us talk specifically about youth pastors, and let me be very clear, I am not saying youth ministry is not important. Youth ministry is vital to the church, but from a tax perspective, many youth pastors do not meet the IRS criteria for minister status. Here is why. The typical youth pastor role looks like this. They plan and run youth group meetings. They organize events, retreats, and activities. They mentor and counsel teenagers. They coordinate volunteers. They manage the youth ministry budget. Now look at that list carefully. How many of those duties involve performing sacraments, leading the full congregation in worship, administering the spiritual governance of the church? In most cases, very few or none. The youth pastor is doing incredibly important work, but much of it is administrative and programmatic, not ministerial in the IRS definition. Compare that to the senior pastor. Preaches every Sunday to the full congregation, performs baptisms and communion, officiates weddings and funerals, provides overall spiritual leadership, administers the direction of the church. The senior pastor clearly meets the criteria. The youth pastor in many cases does not. Another important factor is the youth pastor ordained. Ordination alone does not guarantee minister status, but lack of ordination almost certainly disqualifies someone. Many youth pastors hold a license or certificate from a Bible college or ministry program but have never been formally ordained by a recognized religious body. Without ordination, minister tax status is nearly impossible to claim. So what actually happens if your church has been treating a youth pastor as a minister for tax purposes when they do not qualify? Here is the reality. If the youth pastor has been claiming a housing allowance, they do not qualify for that. Housing allowance becomes taxable income. Every dollar they excluded from taxes over the years they claimed, it becomes back taxes owed, with interest, with penalties, going back potentially 3 years or more. And it is not just the youth pastor who is at risk. The church itself can face penalties for improperly designating a housing allowance for someone who does not qualify. Your church treasurer, your board, your pastor, everyone involved in that designation could be held accountable. This is not a minor paperwork issue. This is a serious tax compliance problem that can result in significant financial damage to both the individual and the church. So what do you do? Here are your action steps to get this right. Step 1. Review the actual job duties. Sit down and honestly document what your youth pastor actually does every week, not what their title says, not what you assume they do. What are their actual day-to-day responsibilities? Compare those duties against the 5 IRS functions we covered earlier. Do their duties align with ministerial functions? Or are they primarily administrative and programmatic? Step 2. Check ordination status. Is your youth pastor formally ordained by a recognized religious denomination or body? Not just licensed or certified, but fully ordained. If not, minister tax status is very difficult to justify. Step 3. Consult a church tax professional. This is not a decision to make on your own. Church tax law is specialized and complex. A qualified CPA or tax attorney who works specifically with churches and nonprofits can review your situation and give you a definitive answer. Do not rely on what another church does. Do not rely on what you have always assumed. Get a professional opinion in writing. Step 4. Correct any past errors carefully. If you discover that your youth pastor has been incorrectly classified, do not panic. Work with your tax professional to understand your options. In some cases, voluntary correction is possible and results in reduced penalties. Ignoring the problem is always worse than addressing it proactively. Step 5. Document everything going forward. Whatever classification you determine is correct, document it. Keep records of the duties performed, the ordination status, the board resolution, and the professional advice you received. If you are ever questioned, documentation is your protection. Here is what I want you to take away from this video. Having the word pastor in a job title does not automatically mean someone qualifies as a minister for tax purposes. The IRS looks at actual duties, ordination status, the nature of the role, and getting this wrong, even with good intentions, can result in serious financial consequences for your staff and your church. The good news is now you know, and knowing gives you the power to get it right. Review your staff classifications, talk to a professional, protect your ministry. That is what Church Money Made Simple is here for. If this video helped you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a video that could protect your church financially. Share this with your church board, your treasurer, or any pastor who has youth ministry staff. Drop GodIT in the comments if this video changed how you think about minister classification. Next video, we are breaking down the donor receipt mistakes that could cost your congregation. Their tax deductions. You do not want to miss that one. See you there.